In a Maryland courtroom, Attorney General Pam Bondi stood frozen, her face flushed with humiliation, as Judge Paula Xinis unleashed a scathing attack that echoed through the live cameras to millions of viewers. "Perhaps you should spend less time on Fox News and more time reading the Constitution," Paula sneered, her words dripping with disdain, cutting Bondi to her core in front of a packed audience. The spectators gasped, their murmurs of shock mingling with the sting of Paula's deliberate cruelty, a cruelty that turned a once-respected judge into a figure of scorn, as the nation watched a woman who had idolized her unravel a devastating truth. This account reveals the betrayal, corruption, and courtroom clash that exposed Judge Paula Xinis, a woman who had fallen from grace in the eyes of Pam Bondi and the public alike. The event centered on Kilmar Abrego, a father of two who had lived in the United States for over a decade. In early 2025, Kilmar was deported to El Salvador under the Trump administration's renewed immigration policies. President Trump had issued executive orders to expedite deportations, and Kilmar's removal became a focal point for the administration's agenda. Attorney General Pam Bondi, a staunch defender of these policies, oversaw the enforcement, ensuring that ICE carried out the orders swiftly. Kilmar's deportation occurred despite a pending court case challenging his removal, a detail that would later become central to the controversy. The case landed before Judge Paula Xinis in the U.S. District Court for the District of Maryland. Paula Xinis, born in 1968 in Mineola, New York, to Greek immigrant parents, had a distinguished legal career. She graduated from the University of Virginia in 1991 with highest distinction and earned her J.D. from Yale Law School in 1997. After clerking for Judge Diana Gribben-Motz on the Fourth Circuit, she served as an assistant federal public defender in Maryland from 1998 to 2011. Later, she became a partner at Murphy, Falcon & Murphy in Baltimore, a role she held until her appointment to the federal bench in 2016 by President Obama. Her confirmation by the Senate with a 53-34 vote marked her as a respected jurist known for her sharp legal mind. Pam Bondi, the U.S. Attorney General, had encountered Paula Xinis years earlier when Bondi served as Florida's Attorney General from 2011 to 2019. During a case involving corporate fraud, Bondi had appeared before Paula, who was then a newly appointed judge. Paula's handling of the case impressed Bondi deeply. She had ruled with precision, cutting through the complexities of the fraud scheme with a clear-eyed focus on the law. After the hearing, Bondi approached Paula outside the courtroom and expressed her admiration. She told Paula that her impartiality and legal acumen were a credit to the judiciary. Paula responded with humility, stating that her only duty was to follow the law. That exchange left a lasting impression on Bondi, who came to view Paula as an ideal of what a judge should be. In 2025, the Kilmar Abrego case brought the two women into direct conflict. Kilmar's family, supported by pro bono lawyers, filed a motion to have him returned to the United States, arguing that his deportation violated due process. They claimed that ICE had acted improperly by removing him while his case was still under review. Judge Paula Xinis issued a ruling ordering the government to facilitate Kilmar's return, a decision that drew widespread attention. News outlets covered the ruling extensively, with some praising Paula as a defender of immigrant rights. Protesters gathered outside the courthouse in Maryland, chanting her name and holding signs demanding justice for Kilmar. Pam Bondi, as Attorney General, was responsible for defending the administration's actions. She publicly criticized Paula's ruling, appearing on Fox News to argue that the United States had no obligation to bring Kilmar back. She emphasized that the matter fell under the jurisdiction of El Salvador's President Bukele, not a U.S. district court. Bondi's comments reflected the administration's stance, but privately she held a lingering respect for Paula based on their past interactions. She initially believed that Paula's ruling, while misguided, was rooted in a genuine interpretation of the law. As the case progressed, Bondi's team began investigating the circumstances surrounding Paula's decision. Their findings revealed a disturbing reality. Paula's ruling was not grounded in constitutional law or legal precedent. Instead, it stemmed from an arrangement with a Democratic senator, a prominent figure known for opposing Trump's immigration policies. Leaked emails uncovered by Bondi's team showed that the senator had approached Paula months earlier with a proposal. He offered her a substantial financial payment in exchange for issuing rulings that would undermine the administration's executive orders, regardless of their legality. The emails detailed the agreement. The senator wrote to Paula, explaining that her position on the bench could be used to challenge Trump's agenda. He assured her that the funds would be transferred discreetly through untraceable channels. Paula responded by expressing interest, but insisted on secrecy to protect her reputation. She agreed to issue rulings that aligned with the Democratic leadership's goals, starting with the Kilmar Abrego case. The ruling to bring Kilmar back was the first step in fulfilling her end of the deal, a decision motivated not by justice, but by financial gain. Further investigation by Bondi's team uncovered another layer of deception. Kilmar Abrego had a documented history as a member of a notorious gang, a fact known to both the Democratic senator and Judge Paula Xinis. Intelligence reports, which had been shared with key figures in the Democratic leadership, detailed Kilmar's involvement in criminal activities, including drug trafficking and extortion, tied to his gang affiliations. Despite this knowledge, the senator and Paula chose to champion Kilmar's case, not out of concern for due process, but as a calculated move to undermine President Trump's immigration policies and score political points against the administration. When Bondi received the evidence, she was devastated. The judge she had admired for years, the woman she had once praised for her integrity, had compromised her principles for money. Bondi spent hours reviewing the emails and intelligence reports, grappling with the betrayal. She recalled the moment she had commended Paula after the corporate fraud case, her words of admiration now tainted by the truth. Determined to uphold justice, Bondi resolved to confront Paula at the next hearing, where the nation would witness the unmasking of a corrupt judge. The hearing took place in a packed courtroom in the U.S. District Court for the District of Maryland. Spectators filled the seats, including Kilmar's family, who sat in the front row. 3 live cameras broadcast the proceedings to a national audience, capturing every moment. Reporters from major news outlets were present, sensing that the case had taken a significant turn. Outside the courthouse, protesters on both sides, those supporting immigrant rights and those backing Trump's policies, gathered, their voices echoing through the walls. Judge Paula Xinis took her seat at the bench, her demeanor composed. Pam Bondi stood at the prosecution table, a binder of evidence in front of her. Across from her, Kilmar's lawyer, a seasoned advocate named Michael Rivera, prepared to argue for his client's return. Rivera had been working closely with Democratic allies, aware of their political motivations, but focused on securing a win for Kilmar's family. The hearing began with Rivera presenting his argument, asserting that Kilmar's deportation had violated due process and that the government had failed to provide adequate notice of the removal proceedings. Bondi responded, her voice firm, outlining the government's position. She stated that Kilmar's deportation had followed the procedures outlined in President Trump's executive orders, which were within the administration's legal rights. She emphasized that the executive branch had the authority to enforce immigration policies, particularly in cases involving national security risks. Rivera countered, accusing the administration of overreach and claiming that Kilmar's removal was a deliberate attempt to silence dissent from immigrant communities. Judge Paula interjected, her tone sharp, siding with Rivera. She criticized Bondi's reliance on executive orders, suggesting that the administration was using them as a shield to avoid accountability. She accused Bondi of prioritizing political loyalty over justice, her words laced with disdain. Bondi felt the sting of Paula's attack, her face reddening with embarrassment. The public criticism was unexpected, and it cut deeply, especially coming from a judge she had once idolized. Bondi requested permission to respond, her voice trembling slightly but resolute. She pointed out that the judiciary had no authority to interfere in matters of foreign policy, such as negotiations with El Salvador's government. She accused Paula of overstepping her role, her frustration evident. Rivera jumped in, arguing that the court had a duty to protect individuals from unlawful government actions, regardless of foreign policy implications. He painted Kilmar as a victim of systemic injustice, a narrative that aligned with the democratic talking points he had been fed. The cross-arguments intensified, each side digging in. Paula, visibly irritated, snapped at Bondi, claiming that her arguments were a desperate attempt to prop up a failing administration. She leaned forward, her voice cutting, and declared that Bondi's loyalty to Trump blinded her to the principles of due process. Rivera nodded in agreement, adding that Kilmar's deportation was a clear violation of his rights as a long-term resident of the United States. Bondi countered, her voice rising, by revealing a critical piece of evidence. Intelligence reports that identified Kilmar as a known gang member involved in criminal activities. The courtroom fell silent as Bondi presented the reports, detailing Kilmar's ties to a gang responsible for drug trafficking and extortion. She turned to Rivera, demanding to know why he had failed to disclose this information to the court. Rivera stammered, caught off guard, and insisted that the reports were irrelevant to the legal question of due process. Paula pounded her gavel, her face flushed with anger, and accused Bondi of introducing inflammatory evidence to distract from the government's misconduct. Bondi seized the moment, her resolve hardening. She addressed Paula directly, revealing that the Democratic senator and Paula herself had been aware of Kilmar's gang affiliations all along. She presented the leaked emails, reading excerpts aloud to the court. The emails showed that the senator had informed Paula of Kilmar's criminal background, but urged her to rule in his favor to undermine Trump's policies. Paula had agreed, accepting financial payments to issue the ruling, fully aware that Kilmar posed a potential threat to public safety. The audience gasped, the weight of the revelation sinking in. Bondi described how Paula's ruling had no basis in constitutional law, a fact that Paula had known but ignored for financial gain. She emphasized that the decision to bring Kilmar back was a political maneuver, orchestrated by the Democrats and executed by Paula to weaken the Trump administration's immigration agenda. Rivera sat down, his face pale, realizing the implications of the scandal. Kilmar's family looked on in shock, their hope for justice overshadowed by the unfolding corruption. Paula's face twisted with rage, her composure shattered. She pounded her gavel again, demanding order, but her voice betrayed her fury. She accused Bondi of fabricating evidence, claiming the emails were a smear campaign orchestrated by the administration to discredit her. Bondi stood her ground, her voice unwavering. She presented the metadata of the emails, proving their authenticity, and challenged Paula to explain her actions. The audience held its breath, sensing the gravity of the moment. Turning to Paula, Bondi spoke directly to her, her tone a mix of disappointment and resolve. She reminded Paula of their past encounter when Bondi had praised her for her legal sense after the corporate fraud case. She recounted how she had viewed Paula as an ideal, a judge who stood for truth above all else. Bondi's voice trembled with emotion as she continued, addressing Paula by name. She said that she had never imagined Paula would compromise her principles, that she had believed Paula to be a woman of honor. Then, in a moment that would be replayed across news networks, Bondi looked Paula in the eye and declared, "You too, Paula. I trusted you, but now I see the truth. You've been exposed, and your corruption is clear for all to witness." The courtroom fell silent, the weight of Bondi's words leaving everyone speechless. Paula's face drained of color, her eyes wide with shock and anger, but she had no response. The live cameras captured the exchange, broadcasting it to millions of viewers. The spectators sat motionless, their earlier murmurs replaced by a stunned hush. Even Kilmar's family, who had been watching with bated breath, seemed frozen, the revelations too overwhelming to process. Bondi concluded her remarks by addressing the audience directly. She spoke of the lessons she had learned, cautioning them to be careful about forming strong impressions of others. She pointed to Paula as an example, a judge who had once seemed incorruptible but had succumbed to greed. Bondi's voice carried a note of solemnity as she emphasized the importance of integrity in the justice system. Before leaving the courtroom, Bondi announced that her office would pursue legal action against Paula for her conduct. She stated that the Department of Justice would investigate the full extent of Paula's dealings with the senator, ensuring that accountability was served. With that, Bondi gathered her materials and walked out, her head held high. The audience remained silent, their eyes following Bondi as she exited. The impact of her words lingered, the revelation of Paula's corruption casting a shadow over the proceedings. Paula sat at the bench, her hands gripping the gavel, her anger now mixed with a visible sense of defeat. The live cameras continued to roll, capturing the aftermath for the nation to witness. The fallout from the hearing was immediate. News outlets ran headlines about Paula's alleged corruption, with some calling for her removal from the bench. On X, users debated the revelations, with many expressing outrage at Paula's actions and others questioning whether Bondi's accusations were politically motivated. The Democratic senator named in the emails issued a statement denying any wrongdoing, but the public scrutiny intensified. Meanwhile, Kilmar Abrego remained in El Salvador, his fate uncertain as the legal battle took a new direction. Pam Bondi's confrontation with Paula Xinis became a defining moment in her tenure as Attorney General. She had exposed a corrupt judge, but the experience left her with a profound sense of disillusionment. The woman she had once admired, the judge she had held up as an ideal, had fallen from grace. For the audience in the courtroom and the millions watching at home, the events served as a reminder of the fragility of trust in those who wield power. Judge Paula Xinis, once a symbol of justice, now stood as a cautionary tale, a testament to the consequences of abandoning principle for personal gain.